Excuse me.
Sorry.
I declare the meeting open and I welcome the people who are viewing this online. Everyone is present. We have no apologies. Do we have any leave of absence?
I do.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop.
27th, which is a Sunday, to 29th of June, which is a Tuesday.
Thank you. Would someone move? Thank you, Councillor Wilkins, a seconder. Thank you to Councillor Joshi. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried.
Oh, sorry, I was going to put my hand up as well.
Oh, that's fine.
From next Tuesday for a week. I'm not sure.
So that's the
29th. From lunchtime, I hope to be at the committee meeting.
29th to the following Tuesday.
To the 6th
Yes.
of July.
Would somebody move? Thank you, Councillor Wilkins, and second again is Councillor Ashby. Councillor Joshi. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. And good luck with your operation. The minutes have been circulated to everyone. Is everyone happy? If not, if so, would someone please move that they be confirmed? It's true and correct record. Thank you, Councillor Joshua. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Coleman. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Are there any declarations of interest? No. We don't have any deputations, representations or presentations. We move on to 5.1, which is the Mayor's Diary. That has been circulated. There is one small error in it, which I picked up today, and that's on the 7th on the last page, 17th of June. It says communications catch up. We did actually have a meeting scheduled, but it was cancelled because I actually met with Sarah during the breakfast at Propel, which was just a little bit earlier. So that meeting didn't actually physically occur at 10 o'clock. Everyone's happy with that. Someone,
I did just check. I'm not absolutely sure, but on the 19th and the 26th of the Mayor's catch-up, I thought I was probably present.
The 19th?
Yeah, I can't get my damn thing.
Oh, I see. There was one where you weren't.
Yeah, I'm not absolutely sure about it. It's inconsequential in actual fact.
Well,
from my perspective.
should we just amend it then, just to add your name to those
Just,
two?
well, I paid a check. I'm not
No, I
absolutely
can't remember.
certain, but I think I was there for one of them for sure.
26th, Councillor Ashby wasn't here.
So
Was
the
it
26th he was not, but the early one in May.
19th was.
19th
Okay.
of May, yeah.
If you could just have that alteration then, on the 19th, that Councillor Ashby attended.
So the Council Secretariat, the way we will manage this is that the Council receive the notes of the diary with amendments as discussed.
Thank you.
And I was most remiss in not introducing Danielle, who's joined us last Tuesday and has really been thrown in the deep end today. She's only been with us for 4 days and is already doing council minutes. So
Please bear with me.
we will. I'm sure she'll do it very admirably. All right, well, if someone would move the adoption that they're received and noted. Thank you, Councillor Ashby. Second, Councillor Wilkins. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Reports from elected members having attended training, conferences or seminars. I have attended some training, 2 lots. One was the Mayor's Leadership Training. Number 2, which was held by the LGA, which was quite informative. It was trying to maintain. The objective of the training was to maintain the momentum of the council, and I have to say I think we're all going quite well. But you always pick up something, which was good. The presenters were excellent, and I think we all benefited greatly by the interaction between the other mayors. Rarely do you have that opportunity when it's just the mayors, there's only 10 or 14 of you, that you can actually chat about things and know that we all agreed they wouldn't be going any further, pick each other's brains, particularly in the breaks. So you certainly benefit. And the other one was the bullying and harassment training session that was done by Moira Jenkins, who's the Mayor of Victor Harbour, and it was arranged by the ALWA, which is the Australian, help me out CEO, Australian Local Government Association of Women. And they put it on. They did 2 sessions and they organised it. I went to the second and it was a full house. There would have been, I'd say, 20 of us, some elected members, some mayors. And I thought Mayor Jenkins did a fantastic job. She is a qualified psychologist, highly qualified psychologist. And I think I was quite abreast with the understanding of what bullying means and harassment, etc. But she reminded you all of what you should do in meetings and in relationships and just living. And I think that's so important that you are reminded. It's brought to your front of your face, front of your mind regularly. And again, I thoroughly enjoyed both. So that was my report for that. We have reports from elected members having attended subsidiary board meetings. Councillor Ashby, do you wish to comment on those board meetings at all? I noticed they're in the minutes are in the...
Well, that just to say that they are in the minutes and they pretty much reflect what was mostly unimportant business. There were several confidential items at both meetings which have to remain confidential.
Fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Bishop, do you wish to talk about that Era Water Board meeting?
There's a lot going on, but a lot of it at this stage is confidential. And I noticed that we are electing a new chair, and I'll comment on that when we get to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to say anything, Elizabeth?
No. Thank you. We don't have any questions from the gallery.
No, Your Worship, none received.
Questions without notice. Do we have any questions without notice? Yes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Fricker. I've only just actually thought of this tonight, although it's occurred to me in the past, and I was just having a chat to Andrew over there before. And I'm not certain of the protocols around this. The CEO may be able to help me with it. But it's occurred to me recently that we don't do an acknowledgement of country for council meetings. I'm just wondering whether there's a reason behind that, or whether there are protocols that need to be followed in relation to doing the acknowledgement of country.
Your Worship, to answer the question, it's simply a decision of council. So if council, the elected member body, would like to have the acknowledgement, thank you, the acknowledgement, then council would resolve that, and then we would commence all meetings by the acknowledgement being provided by yourself, Your Worship.
Can I just ask a follow-up question, whether with protocols that means that you need to do that for
every meeting?
So for every council meeting, or do you mean like all committee meetings as well?
Yes,
so,
all.
Yeah.
Okay. Everything, all council meetings, all committee meetings, special meetings, workshops, informal gatherings. Unless you resolve to segregate it, but why would we?
And I'm not certain whether there's protocols around that, whether you, if you do it for one, you need to do it for all. So.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman, you have a question?
I just thought about this letter from Steve Georgianis in relation to the grants for CCTV.
It's tabled in our correspondence, if you wish to raise it then.
All right.
No, hang on.
Yes,
The safe grants are in there, aren't they?
It is.
Yes.
Sorry.
Agenda 17.
Is it on the agenda? Do you wish to raise it then, or do you wish to raise it now?
I can raise it now, get it out of the way. We did look at some stage, some time ago, looking at CCTV down Walkerville Terrace and putting offers on the table of grants and so forth to put that up. What he's offering now is $200,000.
Well, he's not offering it, he's saying
Well,
it's open. The grants
yeah.
are open.
And what it's worth pursuing.
Your Worship, if I may, part of the problem with the CCTV is not so much the cost of the CCTV, it's the monitoring that goes along with it. And when you talk to police in relation, or SAPOL, who we have a relationship with, they essentially advise unless you're going to actively monitor it and ensure that someone is at the end of that screen, it's not useful to you. And it's also the issue of storing the data that goes with it. So there's quite a lot of administrative and elements associated with that is over and above the infrastructure. The infrastructure is simple. It's the maintenance, the management of the system.
Right. I've got 16 cameras on my building down the road, and I've had the police twice knocking on the door wanting information off their monitoring system, which is recorded like a tape recorder, to investigate people who have been doing whatever they're doing. But because my cameras are actually underneath the awning, and it gets your feet. So I was thinking about moving them up, but in respect to this, I could see a need for it, and the monitoring of it goes onto a hard drive, so the only time I didn't go to look at that hard drive, and I can backdate it a year, is if there's an inquiry from the police, or in my case, if I have an issue.
Yeah. And Your Worship, this building has CCTVs around it, and they have been called upon by SAPOL when there's been activities around the building or premises, and we have been quite useful, but we retain that information in-house. We have servers, and a number of staff have the monitors attached to their computers and can at any time, if they need to, identify what's happening around the perimeter. But we do it obviously for security purposes. There are a number of meetings that are out of hours, so it's also a safety mechanism for our staff and for visitors to the township. And you will notice, Councillor, that when you come into the main entrances, there's a strip, for want of a better word, which shows the height of the individual, so that allows the police to get a sense of how tall the people are, the perpetrators, if there were in fact perpetrators in the area.
So you don't think it's worth putting a motion up to investigate the installation of a CCTV system?
Sorry?
You don't think it's worthwhile putting a motion?
Not through the township. I think that if council considered that, notwithstanding the potential of a $200,000 grant, it's the cost associated beyond that. So council would have to factor that in an ongoing annual contribution. And it's not cheap. It's just not cheap. I think the last time we considered this, councillors, would have been last setting of the budget, where the former group manager assets and infrastructure provided us with an outline of the full costs associated. I might just, Ben, are you up to date with the costs of monitoring?
No.
Sorry. So, councillors, I'm happy to take that question on notice and provide you with the responses via email, and I can factor that response into the minutes just to complete the conversation. If then, councillor, you were particularly interested in having us actively pursue grant funding for CCTV, then perhaps that would be a motion on notice, or a motion without notice, from you at the next meeting. Yeah. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, that's fine. I don't understand the monitoring cost, because the system I've got is monitored, but it goes straight onto a hard drive.
It's not monitored, you mean?
Well, it's unmonitored, but it goes to a hard drive, but it's only called on if I need it.
Yeah. So the monitoring that I refer to as the SAPOL monitoring is to ensure that it's a live feed, so that you could activate, you can see exactly what's happening at any given time, as opposed to a recording whereby the activity or the offence has occurred and then it's a period of time after the police are able to investigate.
All right.
Councillor Bishop?
On the last council, we offered $5,000
Correct.
to the businesses up and down Walkerville Terrace if they wanted to take up CCTV.
Yes.
How many of them took up that?
Through your worship, not one person took us up on that offer.
Yeah.
And so we chose, council considered that, and we chose not to maintain that $5,000 funding available for businesses.
Thank you. There are no questions on notice. There are no petitions. Motions without notice. Are there any motions? Councillor Williams. Sorry, I'm coughing. I've got something stuck. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor Fricker. I've just typed this up while I've been sitting here. And it's that administration investigate the protocols around the acknowledgement of country and report back to council for council to consider, including the acknowledgement of country prior to full council meetings.
Would you be able to bring it around just so Daniel can type it?
I can email it to if you'd like me to. That will save you time.
That'll be great, thank you.
The only thing is I may not have
Just
your
office.
email. Just office.
It's office.
At Walkerville.
Well, just right. I've actually done it in an email myself anyway.
Yeah, so when they arrive, cut and paste it so that all the elected members can see what we're doing.
Office at Walkerville. Yeah. And sorry, just the thinking behind is I think it's important, rather than just saying that we should do it, is for council to consider it and get obviously any protocols that do sit behind that, and any other information might be useful prior to considering it. There you go, that's being sent to you now, so
Thank you.
you've got it.
It'll come up very shortly.
And I don't really need to discuss it any further. We haven't put it.
Is there a second? Thank you, Councillor Wilkins. You wish to speak?
No, I don't think I need to. It's fairly
Councillor Wilkins?
self-explanatory, I think.
No, fine.
Anyone else wish to speak? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Again? Are you in favour?
I'm in favour.
Thank you. Thank you, carried. Are there any other motions without notice? No, there are no motions with notice. We move on to the reports requiring decision from Council. 14.1.1, the design review scheme. Does anyone have any questions regarding this recommendation and the papers that support it?
Your Worships, I wonder if it might be useful for the group manager to divulge the information she provided to you via email this afternoon in relation to this matter, to have a better understanding about the system and the scheme.
And I'll explain why this happened. I wondered if we could bring in a threshold, that if it were worth X, that, you know, we should look at it. But because if it's there was a threshold if it went to SCAP, you know, it had to be over 6 million. So whether we should look at something like that. Otherwise, if they don't go to SCAP, anyway. So I asked the questions, and then Andrew replied quite a detailed answer, and that is all things have changed. But off you go, Andrea. I think it's a very good background.
Alright, so in 2011 the state government introduced a design review scheme only for state developments that were to be assessed by the Commission. Since 2011 this program has been running somewhat successfully, with them having oversight and assisting large developments over $10 million in the city, over $3 million in Port Adelaide Enfield CBD, in the Port Adelaide CBD, and in a few areas around like Holfast Bay on the foreshore, a few designated places in the inner metro and Prospect, Kilburn and Prospect Road. So SCAP has had oversight through with the design review process over a number of inner metropolitan and outer metropolitan areas. The PDI Act allows local governments to create their own design review panels at their own cost, and insists or recommends in the Act that the cost should be borne by the authority, much in the same way that it's currently borne by the authority at the state government level. So a number of councils like us have been considering what are the ramifications financially and resource-wise on bringing such a service internally, and to assist councils in coming to a conclusion on it. The state government, who runs the state design review, has released, I guess, a guide to us. However, this guide doesn't give us costs. It doesn't tell us how much it will actually cost to run such a service. And for a council like us, who are very small, we probably have 2 or 3 sites that might warrant it. And I guess the reason you would want design review engagement is to improve design outcomes. That's its remit. So if we have a large-scale commercial type development that, say, is over $5 million, we could ensure that we have a design review program. However, getting a design review program up and running and continuing it and ensuring that the experts that consist of that panel are up to date and accredited, it's a lot of resource impact for a small council, or even a council with the size of North Paine and St Peters, who are also considering it. So this has been presented across the metropolitan area to all councils, and the report before you tonight is a decision report which is based on obviously our professional advice and research, which has indicated that at the moment the system that is suggested that we implement is somewhat onerous on local councils and of a cost that is very likely to be prohibitive. Also one that would impact on our operational budgets and would have to result in some sort of revenue making somewhere else or rates hike. It's a very expensive program to run well and to run consistently and regularly. So that's why you have the report before you, and that's our advice. The Mayor requested some information about what used to happen in the old system, where there are triggers of developments that were over, say, 3 million, that would then, we would stop being the authority for, and then automatically it would go to SCAP, the Commission. So in response, I did a bit of research, and the new system is somewhat different to the old system. So the old system used to have triggers based on dollars. The new system has triggers based on zoning. So without getting too academic and too technical, there are 3 types of pathways in the new planning system. One is very much like the residential code pathway in the old system, res code. You might have heard that, and that's called the DTS, deemed to satisfy. So you tick a number of boxes, on balance, it seems okay. I'm simplifying it a lot. So performance assessed is a bit like category 3 developments, where it's a little bit more complex. So a tick box approach doesn't really work. A human has to interact with it rather than a generated decision from the development assessment portal. And then you've got impact assessed, which is the equivalent, I guess, to major project status. So if the minister thinks something is of economic benefit to a particular area, they will call that in and they will assess it themselves, and it will be taken out of that council area's hands where that development is proposed. So if a development falls within the impact assessed, so former major projects assessment pathway, then the minister, via the Commission, becomes the authority. So in answer to the Mayor's question, when does that actually happen? It happens, you go into the Act, you go into the regs, and in Schedule 6, it happens for us in a metropolitan area where buildings exceed 4 stories. But there's a caveat on that, and it says that this only applies if the zone that that site finds itself within is urban corridor zone. And if it's an urban corridor zone, it has an overlay that's applied to it, which is called design overlay. So that is the trigger for it to go to SCAP and for it to have design review. So that is the only time design review will impact one of our sites in our area. At the moment, we don't have any urban corridor zones. However, we have 2 rezoning efforts underway, which are also known as development plan amendments by the Matthews Group at Buckingham Arms and the Scotty's Motel site. So they're both looking at a policy suite of rezoning that is urban corridor, some form of urban corridor. There are 4 types to choose from, and depending on where it sits, they select which one suits better. So those 2 sites potentially could be successful in that change, in that rezoning, have the design overlay on top, exceed 4 stories, which is very likely, otherwise it wouldn't be worth anyone's time, and then go to the SCAP for decision. And then depending on how open the owner or the developer is, they can either cold lodge, which means they have no advice, or they can go down the design review pathway. So design review is always voluntary. If a developer chooses to engage with that process, then it comes at a cost borne by the ratepayer at state level. At local level, the obvious person to borne that cost through council would be the ratepayer. So I think that is why there is much reticence among metropolitan councils to consider this right now, because there is no carrot. It's not like we can say to a developer, hey, come and do design review. It's free for you. We'll wear the cost, but we'll give you an extra story, because we don't have the authority to offer that, because we don't write the policy. So I guess in closing, council as an authority in this instance doesn't have any power over compelling someone to come to design review. And if we were to create a design review right now, we would have a hard time as administration in convincing developers to I guess, add another 6 to 8 weeks on top of their wait time to get development approval, and have to be open to redesigning, which is essentially what design review does. It identifies gaps and it improves the built form, and that can't happen without a period of time where people can take the advice and make changes to those drawings that are iterative. Now, just out of interest, because I thought this was quite, for me, it was interesting. In past instances where certain applicants in our township have bypassed council as the authority and gone to SCAP for decisions, and I think I can only think of one, Wilderness School. SCAP was the authority in those instances by virtue of the dollar value being over a certain amount. That was in the old system. In the new system, any new developments that happen on that particular school's grounds would have to see Town of Walkerville as the authority, unless the school or the applicant on the school's behalf would compel the minister by writing to them or lobbying them to make SCAP the authority. So, yeah, that was really interesting.
So, are there any questions regarding the report?
Just one. So if we committed to a design review process, would a developer then be committed, once there was an agreement between the council and themselves on a particular design, or they go through the process and they say, oh no, actually I don't like this, see you later, I'll go either through the SCAP model or whatever. Are they, in any way, are they bound
by the decision?
By the decision, or is it just a negotiated thing? And
so what happens, what we understand would happen at a local level would be that a developer would approach us at the counter or online, and they would say, this is my proposition, I'd like to engage with your design review process. And we would refer it to the panel. The panel would be independent to us, and they would provide us with a letter of design advice that would be CC'd to the developer. That would be turned around within 48 hours, and that particular applicant would look at the advice and go, okay, right, okay, we'll make these changes, option 1, and then come back for a second iteration at design review. On average, 3 design review sessions are recommended at state government level, and that's a best practice sort of approach. Option 2, the developer would go, this is too hard, it's voluntary, and it is voluntary in the Act, we don't want to engage with this, we're not going to, we're going to cold lodge. So we will, thank you very much, but no. So we'll put in the application as it is and see what happens, take a bet. So they are not compelled to stay in the program, and once they complete the program, they don't have to submit that revised design. They can, I mean, it would be a waste of their time and our time or the panel's time, but they can put in a completely different design and have it cold lodged and assessed on merit.
So it could be just free advice.
It's free to them.
Take what they want, thank you very much, and then still change it.
And I think, Your Worship, so the important thing here is they haven't lodged anything.
No.
It's pre-lodgement. So it's really,
It's not binding.
It's not binding on anybody because there's no decisions. They're only talking, having. Look, I think that if there's a benefit, the benefit is giving them access to a group of design experts to talk through and walk through their anticipated application.
Which could improve the built form, but not necessarily.
Yeah, and they may or may not choose to proceed. So that's what it is. It's free advice, pre-lodgement, and that's the key, pre-lodgement advice.
So we already offer that through you, Chair. We already offer pre-lodgement advice to commercial developments that are of significant size, because we can see that there is an obvious investment to be gained if we invest up front.
But it's also not necessarily those customers or clients either. It's also, I see developers here who are looking at building, subdividing, and they're talking to Carly, and only because I know a couple of them. And I know what they say, that they get really good service here. So, and it's explained. They might not like some of our points of view, but they say they at least understand where we're coming from.
We're not a design review panel.
No, but
we don't purport ourselves to be that, but we provide a pre-lodgement service which assists, hopefully, applicants through the process.
Understanding the planning, understanding the Act and what's required. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if there are no further questions, there has been a second point added to the motion, which is up there. The Council notes that where the Commission's gap is the authority, that the design review process is available to those proponents. So if people are happy with that motion, would someone move it, please? Councillor Wilkins, and a seconder is Councillor Furlan. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Wilkins or Councillor Furlan?
But I think County Walkerville offers a great service here, so I don't see why you try up something else.
Thank you. Well, I'll put it to the vote then. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Thank you, Andrea. I think I learned a bit more about the planning system today. We now move on to 14.1.2, which is the Local Heritage and Transition Development Plan Amendment final report. I have to say, to start this, we had to do this, and then we didn't, but my gosh, thank God we did. Because this, I have to say, when I saw this, I went, I was reading here, and I read the whole lot and thoroughly enjoyed it. I felt I learnt a lot, and I found the history of some of our houses to be, and we've actually got it documented, the research, we've got it now. We haven't done it for a long time, and I think it was forced upon us, but it was good. So thank you. It must have taken people many, many, many hours. It's been worth it.
Yes, I just want to add my congratulations. I thought it was the most amazing document.
Oh.
So thank you for doing it.
And I also have received some very good feedback from some people that live in these houses, and were very impressed on how where they were invited in to discuss it with Andrea and the architect, and how it was put and it was explained, and they quite enjoyed the process. I don't know whether they agreed to it or not. I didn't ask. It wasn't my place at that time to ask. But they were just wishing to say that they did enjoy the process. So that was good feedback. So do we have any questions regarding this, Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Mayor Fricker. It's just around the HIS scheme and also some of the commentary that came back from some of the residents regarding the houses and whether there was any possible incentive for some of these places to have listings. So essentially the questions really around, I contemplated adding it to the motion, whether we should be considering the HIS scheme and any other appropriate support methods for owners of heritage listed properties. Now whether we think we need another report back in relation to that to see whether we think it is worth, obviously people have to nominate to have their properties protected. If they haven't, well, so be it. But whether there is anything that we can do that could encourage, whether any of those people would be, I guess, sort of on the edge or could possibly be tilted one way or the other if they felt there was some support.
What sort of support are you talking about?
Well, I mean, I guess that's the whole thing is getting a report from administration, because I guess there's different methods of support, I suppose, and whether we knew what cost implications on that would be. I mean, obviously the main thing is keeping the properties kept in good condition, but there's all sorts of different, I guess, rebates you can do. It's just a matter of how, and we've been down this path obviously a number of times around the importance of the heritage or the fabric of the houses within the area, and it's a conversation for council whether they're serious about trying to get some of the people that don't want their places listed, if there was any incentive we could give them to do that, whether it's worth investigating.
Yeah, so I've worked in a number of metropolitan councils that have a HIS, a Heritage Incentive Scheme, and I note that the current strategic plan has one of the 7 pillars of heritage, and also that there is a principle or a goal in there that talks about improving interpretive signage as it relates to heritage, which we're doing, and also about a heritage incentive scheme. So that's not new to us. We are looking at the next couple of years how we can implement that. It would require a budget bid and a calculation of best case scenario. We have 80 places on the local heritage list at the moment that such a scheme would open grant applications to. In addition, best case scenario after this particular DPA, should the Minister support us, we would have another 30 places. So that would be 110 local heritage places. And I was just about to do the maths and see how much it would cost. 110 places times 3,000. Sorry, maths is not my forte. Or 5,000. And that gives you an idea of what sort of money you would have to, as a council, allocate yearly. And it's quite an onerous process from an administrative point of view, because we have to provide support to the people doing the owners, heritage conservation advice, which could be as simple as a fact sheet that we issue on mortar mixes and how to do things. I mean, it's not rocket science. And then people would then provide us with quotes, 3 at a minimum. We would have to make sure that those people providing the quotes are part of the artisan trades craftsman list of Heritage SA, which is available to the public. Cross-reference that, approve the quotes, the work gets done, gets paid up front by the owner, and then there is no retrospective grant payment. So they would have to pay for it first, and then we would reimburse them 50%. So if we went down the path of $5,000 per property, what's the maths, Stephen? Councillor Fallon?
5,000 by 110.
Yeah.
About 55,000.
Is that? Okay, no.
No, try 550,000.
There you go.
Yes, so
Carry the zero. mate.
Adelaide City Council, for example, has $2 million available as far as I know for residential
Yeah.
grants. It might be more for commercial, and that comes from, again, not a finance person, but it's something that's been happening for at least 30 years. So I'm not sure if it's rate related or whether it's operational. Is that right?
Yeah.
So it's something that council has to really consider, and it's not necessarily, from my point of view as the author of this report, I'd like to separate the two issues because this is a report that's going to the minister, and this, what we're talking about is more housekeeping, getting our ducks in an order. And I think it does require probably a workshop with some case studies, examples of what other councils are doing. Burnside, for example, offers $3,000 to everybody, locally listed and contributory items, as long as you fit in with the criteria that they have. So, but they do cap it at $30,000 a year. So first in, best dressed. If you had it last year, you're not getting it again. And also, the more, I guess, bespoke. The more bespoke the scope of work, the more interesting, the more likely they are to go and support it. So there are lots of options, and it doesn't mean that we have to cough up $500,000 every year.
Councillor Ashby, wish to comment?
I'm all in favour of heritage, but I think that talking about $5,000 as a grant, I mean, how far is that going to go in a heritage restoration? I mean, it's not even going to get past the front gate.
That's right, correct.
You start talking
Well,
in terms of money.
we're going off the subject of this motion that's here in front of us. I have no problems if I've taken what Andrew suggested, that we keep this two separate items, and perhaps you would like Councillor Williams maybe next meeting to move a motion regarding the what we could maybe have a review or a workshop to discuss it in more detail, to then perhaps develop it up if we so choose to then go to budget bid for next year. It's good, we should get our ducks in a row now. But I think if I can bring everyone back to the actual motion and recommendation, because this is going to the Minister.
Look, I'd be quite happy, thank you, Mayor Fricker. I'd be quite happy to do that. It's just, it's something that I don't think we should just let go.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Otherwise
Next
it's done.
meeting,
If
you bring it forward as a motion,
yeah,
I think that would be a good idea.
and then
Okay.
council can debate, obviously, if it is through the budgetary process, the merits that it sees behind it.
Your Worship, the alternative is that it comes in by SPDPC, so that the SPDPC can consider the elements of what it would like investigated or workshopped, which can then come to council. So it's a bit more informed process in that regard.
Yeah,
Good idea.
that's fine.
Right, does anyone have any questions further on the recommendation or the motion?
I'm happy to move it.
Thank you, Councillor Furlong. The seconder, Councillor Williams. All those in favour? Thank you, carried. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for a very good report.
Fantastic work.
And I really enjoyed reading it.
Crosses in it.
Yeah, there's some good history there.
Yeah, exactly.
We now move on to 14.1.3, which is the urban tree, regarding Walkerville Oval and the urban tree management report. Papers are there regarding the trees. Does anyone have any questions regarding the trees and the recommendation?
I just have a couple of queries. I think I understand it, but I just want to clarify it. Compensatory planting, Your Worship, I assume, is replacing it with a new tree.
Yes.
The recycling one fascinates me a bit. Does that mean reusing the timber in other areas?
If you remembered, we did discuss that at that meeting, that when the trees, if the trees are removed, that then it can be used at the playground. So,
Sculptures.
so the trees do stay on the ground, but they may not be upright or with all their branches.
Spread around.
Okay, yeah, I thought that would be the case. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Fallon?
I don't think this is a good look. That we're trying to protect as many trees both on private and public land. And I know at the council assessment panel we do push on trying to make sure applicants retain it. So I see this as a bit of an own goal. Right, we're here going to chop down 8 trees, of which 6 are really, they're in good condition. It's only for design reason, as per the report. Only 2 are marginally unhealthy, but you know, the pictures looked alright to me, but that's a different story. I have a real problem how we can then go to the community and say, hang on, look, we want you to hold on to your trees, but yet my response would be, well, you've got to talk the talk. You know, it's not do as I say. What was I saying?
Yeah.
Do as I say, not as I do. I just think, have we really tried hard enough to protect those trees? Trees A, B and C were already included in the design we went out to the community based on what the report says. Now we're changing that. You know, I just think there's, you know, I could be wrong, there might be some backlash on this.
I agree with you. I agree because I'm the greatest greenie about trees.
Oh, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a greenie, but I just look at these things and I just see.
And I'm very vocal when I see big trees being pulled down. However, there are some trees there that do lose branches just because they lose branches. They crack and go bang. And I know it does worry the residents of Warwick Street because we have a lot of children out there. That's first. And secondly, unfortunately, it is in the way of the design. And we have trees the whole way round. So we are trying to protect some of the trees. It's not like they're the only trees we've got. We can't do the design and the placement of it. There are trees that have to be affected, unfortunately. We can't put them, we don't want to do a Burnside centre, so you don't put a roof over it. It doesn't work, but we are going to have to remove some of them.
The trees A, B and C were already included in the original design, and now we're saying we're taking those out. So whoever the architect was who came up with that initial scheme said those 3 trees are in, and now we're coming back and saying we're taking them out.
They're the ones that are the...
The other ones on the
on the mound.
Aren't A, B and C the huckberries? Aren't A, B and C the huckberries?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they go. They straight up go. They're obnoxious weeds.
They are. No, they're not. They are.
They should never have been planted in the first place. And regarding trees 1, 2 and 3, which will be, if we build up to them, Australian natives are 9 times bigger underground than they are on the top. So as soon as we start shifting and using, covering their roots, they're going to die. So...
That's 1, 2 and 3.
1, 2 and 3.
I might just put it out there because
I agree.
Trees, we haven't got a good story to tell.
There's a lot more going on behind the scenes than you know, too.
Because the way the report reads, there's only 2 that have poor health. The other 6 are only being removed for design reasons, 3 of which were included in the original one.
Well, A, B and C are huckleberries and they are an issue.
But they were included in the original design. They should have been taken out then. It should have been made clear. Because when it goes to the community, it will
not necessarily.
I'm only just, I think I've made my view clear on how we get to the end point.
Yes, Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Mayor Flickoff. A couple of points to that. One is in point 1 in the recommendation, it does say should the design solution require it.
Yeah.
So we're not necessarily saying that all trees would come out. It depends upon the design that
Final
ends
design.
up, that ends up coming back. And I guess a possible thing we could do is, I mean, we've got the word support in there, whether we have to support it at this point in time, or consider the removal should the design solution require it. So at that point in time, we consider their removal. I'm not sure. I think I'd support the recommendation anyway. Separately to what Councillor Furlan's just said, should the trees be removed and be used, and which is covered in point 2 here, should they be removed and recycled and used as part of future landscape designs? I had part of a motion that I'd like to add to that there was some, for pieces that are large enough, there'd be some sort of recognition of where the trees have come from, a plaque to say these trees were on Walkerville over Warwick Street, or whatever it is that we need to do, so that they're recognised where they were previously. Just once again, for the history of the township, I don't think we have any history of those palm trees that are at Levi Oval that were moved from Road Terrace, actually where the trees are, and I think that's important to identify that for our history. So that's something, obviously I'd like to hear other members' opinions yet, but that's something that I'd probably like to add to the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Ninke?
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I'm just scrolling past it. I'm just curious about, obviously I'm not on the strategic committee, so I don't really, I mean, I'm sitting here I know it says should the design solution require it, but there must already be a bit of a design at this point, is there? I mean, why, under the normal application process, how's the categorisation? I'm a bit lost with the new planning scheme, but in the old scheme it would have been publicly notified, so you would actually identified those trees for removal as part of that notification. So what's the current method now? What's the process now?
Through you, Chair. So, like I said before, performance assessed is the equivalent of category 2 or 3 in the old system. So, performance assessment pathway would determine public notification, and depending on the extent of works, how far that goes in terms of a distance. However, we're not the authority in this instance. It'll go to SCAP because there's a conflict of interest. We can't assess our own applications. Our own applications.
Okay, so once this final design comes out and we have identified those, I think the majority of the discussion is pretty much around the, well, for my, the trees, was it 1, 2 and 3, I think, where the new car park is. I mean, I think that would be considered under the assessment what the remaining life of those trees, what the bitumen might be doing to those, you know, the likelihood of the tree suffering and dropping limbs. So I think that would be flushed out anyway. I mean, I'm kind of with Councillor Furman here. I'd be I don't really understand why we even have to make this decision now. Wouldn't it be fleshed out through the process anyhow?
Because it involves the trees. It involves trees. The committee felt it was important that we've had some various discussions trying to finalise the design, and that's why we asked that this motion go forward and that they support should the design require. We didn't want to have to take it into SCAP and then say, you know, we want to get rid of these trees without advising council, without having the support of council.
But is there alternative design solutions? I mean, I wouldn't.
We've been trying up all sorts of things, but at the moment, particularly the 3, A, B and C, no.
How about 1, 2 and 3?
Well, yeah, sorry. Yes, probably 4 and 5 are the ones that would survive at the moment. It hasn't been finalised.
Your Worship, just having a sideline conversation. Sorry, Councillor.
No.
There's a confidential item, a verbal update, later this evening. If Council was comfortable, if we were to either withdraw this item now or defer it, until after you've heard the confidential discussion. And that doesn't mean so that you can necessarily consider it tonight. We can always bring this back into the chamber at the next meeting.
Yes.
But I think it's important that you hear what we need to provide you this evening.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think for the
Yep.
members that aren't on the
But
committee,
yes,
we're
I agree.
blindsided by this. Yeah.
Absolutely, Councillor.
Okay, sure.
So on that basis, Your Worship, perhaps we defer this item.
Yes. Someone move. Councillor Williams, second to Councillor Ashby. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Okay, moving on to 14.2, the assessment panel and assessment manager reporting policies. As the report states, it went out for public consultation. However, there were no submissions received. Are there any comments, or is someone just happy to put the motion? Thank you, Councillor Furlong. Second to Councillor Wilkins. We'll just wait for a minute while.
Sorry, Your Worship, I was
That's
just
right.
going to explain the process.
Can we go back to the motion? D-I-double-F. Can we go back to the motion we're just doing there? No, sorry, 14.1 it's a 14.2.1. Go down. And yeah, and that was moved by Councillor Furlong, seconded Councillor Wilkins. Is that correct? Sorry, I'm not trying to.
Sorry.
Wilkins, thank you.
Thank you.
All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Move on to 14.2.2, draft mobile food vendor policy consultation feedback. There has been none, so does someone happy to move that? Thank you, Councillor Ashby. Second to Councillor Wilkins. Sorry, Councillor Josh, my peripheral vision's not working out. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Move on to 14.2.3, development, enforcement and compliance policy. No comments. If not, would someone be happy to move that one? Councillor Joshi, second to Councillor Bishop. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. We move to 14. Hang on, sorry. 14.3.1, the development, enforcement and compliance policy consultation feedback. This is the. Sorry, it's wrong.
No,
yeah, sorry.
sorry.
It's the financial assistance grant. My mistake, sorry.
It's my mistake.
Are there any questions regarding this? Councillor Wilkins.
Just thanks, Matt, for just one regarding the amenity of an Exelou at Hamilton Reserves. Was that ever brought up in community consultation, or was there any feedback from residents on it?
Through Your Worship, not formally, Councillor. We were about to release a flyer to the local community to let them know what works are being undertaken around Hamilton. We've actually held off of that pending tonight. So if Council resolves to actually proceed with the Exelou, that
Hang on, we've jumped to the agenda item. We're currently talking about the early receipt of the financial assistance grant. 14.3.1, the development.
Which is to give us a new projector.
Yeah, which is the 2021 financial assistance grant. You're on the next one, Councillor Wilkins. Yes.
It's
all right. I'm thinking, I'm sure that's not in the exclusion. I remembered reading it. It's the fact that we got, and I hate the word, the fags early, and we had to spend it before the 30th of June. Yes, they've given us a couple of weeks. Excuse me. Oh, sorry.
Bless you.
So, and it has enabled the CEO and the administration to review what is in our forward long-term plan of smaller items that we really need to spend money on today. And it is quite well known, well, we don't have a projector because it doesn't work. It died.
And Your Worship, before Councillor Wilkins asks a question potentially, This is not an unusual, sadly it's not unusual. What was unexpected was the amount of money we received. So last year and the year before that, we generally receive early grants in the order of anywhere between 30,000 and 50,000. 2 years ago we got 70. Was last year or the year before?
Last year.
Yeah, last financial year we got $75,000 early, and we had 48 hours to spend it. Otherwise, it's use it or lose it. So the reason council has generally not seen reports of this nature is because we hardly ever get any notice period, and we have to spend the funds very, very quickly. So I've always used my delegated discretion in relation to where those funds go. And we always focus on front of house before we focus on back of house. This instance, we've had a little bit more time. The amount of money was completely unexpected. We actually weren't expecting to receive this amount of money this particular time. So $141,000, plenty of time. Just before the council meeting, I felt compelled and I needed to put the question to council because it is a lot of money. It's not $20,000, $30,000, $50,000. It's a substantial amount of money. This is why you're seeing it tonight, and the items identified are already have been deferred from this financial 21-22 into later years. We cut back on the IT budget, councillors, if you recall, which came through Budget Workshop 3 and also followed up on Budget Workshop 4. These items were embedded in the long-term financial plan, and we know we can deliver these within the due dates. That's why these are the projects that you're seeing before you.
Now, Councillor Wilkins, you had a question.
I do, thanks, Mayor Trigger. Look, lovely to get this kind of cash for the end of financial year. I guess I've got two queries. One's around the council chamber AV and projector replacement. Does that include some kind of video conferencing setup? As much as we all went through that last year, it's quite a challenge with iPads and headphones and all sorts. I'd lovely to have a nice, just single solution for the chamber.
Through your worship, yes is the short answer to that. I think a holistic approach to the upgrade of the system is probably beneficial, that included.
Okay.
And you will specifically notice that we haven't replaced our broken projector with a borrowed projector. We're actually trialling the notion of the TV, and this was part of our desires to see how effective and efficient it was, and the clarity that we're getting. That's only a 60 inch. Yeah. So part of the option is not just necessarily an AV projector. It may very well be one of these smart TVs that allows video conferencing. That's also whiteboard equivalent. Yes. So we'll see what we can accommodate within the price point.
Sounds great. The second question was around 48,000 on town hall lighting upgrade.
Yeah.
Significant sum. I know electricity is very expensive.
Through your worship, the issue that I had with the lights in there, we've had this quoted up previously a number of times over the years, and it's directional spotlighting for the stage, and additional lights to light the entire system. The big cost comes with scaffolding to get up into the crawl space in order to run the wire and cable.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Councillor Bishop.
Regarding the water fountains, I didn't even know we had any drinking fountains in Walkerville. And so, first of all, where are they? But secondly, are we allowed to have drinking fountains in this COVID world?
Through your worship, we've got probably 8 or 10, so there's...
Really?
Yeah, a lot of Linear Park.
Linear Park,
Willow Bend, for example, has got one. We're putting some new ones in at Hamilton Reserve when that goes in. There's a number along, there's one in Mary B. Harris. So there's a lot scattered around the place. A lot of them are getting towards end of life. So this gives an opportunity to purchase the actual fountain itself, and then we can then install that on an as-needs basis going forward, so we can store those and then install them.
And these will have the doggy.
Yeah, these will have the dog bowl parts as well, so to service the people in Linear Park. And at this stage, yet we're still able to have our fountains under the current restrictions as accessible to the general public.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I've got a question about the fountains as well, and that's more around the design of the fountains, because I know there's a couple at Walkerville Oval as well, and where all of them are in the area, because I use them often enough. But the design of the ones that are through the city that we have at Mary P. Harris Reserve, where the jet of water comes out to the side instead of straight up in the air, is so much better than the ones straight up in the air, because a lot of the times the ones straight up in the air end up getting stuff stuck in them and they don't operate, or they shoot you in the eye, or you get nothing out of them at all. Where the ones that go out to the side, which do also have the doggy option with them as well, to me, just throughout the city work a hell of a lot better than the ones going straight up.
Through your worship, that'll be our intent, is to look at the more modern design with the out, and then they also have the bottle. A lot of them have the bottle filling dispensers as well, so that you can actually fill your water bottles out of them rather than having to try and bend it and twist it and shape it to try and get some water in there. So that's the intent. That will be replaced with the new style, which is more like your Mary P. Harris access.
Are there any further questions? Yes, Councillor Furlong.
Probably just one around, and I'm looking towards the 21-22 financial year and the spend we've got, which is going to be significant. I would have maybe looked at some of that money and used it to purchase some of those capital items in that financial year to just sort of stay ahead of the game, rather than these as being beyond 21-22, to try and effectively start to reduce that capex spend with this money, and also would apply to the excess 100-odd thousand that we got from the XL loop. I'm just wondering, did anyone consider some of those capital items for the 21-22 year that we could buy now that were rolled in for the next financial year?
Through your worship, the AV ones, the town hall system, with the exception of the lighting, I believe, all of the other ones have been targeted for next financial year.
21-22.
Correct.
So they were in that budget.
Correct.
So we're now paying them. Okay.
Correct.
So which ones?
Bringing them forward.
Which ones were they?
So the projector, the 1855, the town hall AV, and then the compatible lectern.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. And I do like the weed spraying. That was always gonna, because to me that's a visual thing. People see that out there. People don't see upgraded lighting in the town hall. It's a very small group for 48,000. You want to have a lot of rock concerts in there, but people get that. But the weed spraying would get good value at 8,500.
To give the town hall its due, it is used nearly every day.
Okay, I'll stay corrected.
By interest groups, there it is. We have, children and babies and older people. It's amazing how whenever I come here, there's normally somebody in there, which is great. It's being used all the time. If no one has any further questions, would you care to move? Thank you, Councillor Wilkins. Second is Councillor Furlan. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. We now move on to 14.3.2, which is the local roads. Do you wish to now re-ask your question, Councillor Wilkins?
Give me that for a make sure I'm on the right one. Yeah. It's a question of administration about what consultation was taken in regards to the potential activity at Hamilton Reserve, if there was any.
Through your worship, so as Sam mentioned previously, we had a letter go out, was planned to go out, and we waited to this to notify of the toilet. As a part of the original consultation that's undertaken, the feedback received, a large portion requested a toilet within Hamilton Reserve. The designs that we undertook for the ones about to be constructed had allowance for a toilet. So based on the feedback, we incorporated a toilet into the design. Whether it was constructed or not was actual funding, but there was allowances made within that design to cater for a toilet based on that feedback received as a part of the greater consultation. So while there's been no direct, we're going to put a toilet here, we have used the feedback received, and then based on the outcome of tonight, we'll then communicate that back to them.
Thank you.
So in essence, through your worship, in essence the feedback is what drove this project from being put forward as a result of the phase 3 funding, which was completely unexpected.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Frigga. I I can't quite remember the terminology. Ben might be able to. I'm not even sure, Ben, whether you were here at this point in time. But there was some discussion around the Hamilton Reserve and the flooding. There was talk about, I'll use the term floodplain, but I know that that's not correct. And there was consideration around the location of any infrastructure, given the floods that we had in 2016, was it, when Willow Bend was basically up above all the shelters and everything down there. And there was consideration at SPDPC at one stage whether we needed to do that as part of the process of Hamilton Reserve. We decided not to, largely because there wasn't going to be a lot of infrastructure in the location should that flooding occur. Now it might be you putting a toilet there, although the Exeloos are probably designed to be okay in that scenario. But I think the location in Hamilton Reserve is very important, and one of the things I thought of first up was obviously as you go up the hill there, naturally the higher up you go, the less likely there is to have issues if there's flooding. We didn't think at the time we needed to spend a lot of money on a report to be able to tell us that. The higher you go up, the water is. So maybe, I'm not sure, but I can't remember whether you were here when we were considering that or not, but that's something we may either want to reconsider or we just think about very carefully about the location, because that bottom end down toward the Ascot Avenue Bridge is the area that is obviously more likely should there be a significant flood.
Through your worship, so the current design has it not far from the location of the nature play and the barbecue shelters. So I believe my understanding is the original design took that into account, and while we can't account for it not ever going underwater, it has been pushed up kind of as far as we can without it becoming a visual impulse from the street. So we kind of tried to balance that risk of flood versus the visual amenity for the residents on Stewart and Mimosa, so they don't just sit there looking at the structures themselves. So we can have another look at it and make sure that whereas a public position we avoid as much risk of the flood as it is. As I said, the design was based on that, so we can have a quick review before, if it's deemed that we want to go ahead, that we can quickly review that.
Thank you. Councillor Nenke?
Sorry, yeah, not quite sure how to ask this, but sorry, I think you just talked about the community consultation, the original, and although we didn't ask a question directly about public toilets or the addition of a toilet, there was a lot of feedback requesting it. What was the sort of numbers returned from the overall survey, and how many of the residents living around the reserve actually asked for the toilet? Was it just more was it more people regionally asking for the toilet, or was it? I'm just quite sensitive for people living around the reserve. That's
Through your worship, the report that I've seen, obviously the consultation happened prior to my commencement, but the reports I've seen didn't split out whether the residents were immediately adjacent versus the wider area region. So I couldn't tell you the breakdown of whether the residents. My gut feel is the residents immediately adjacent probably, well, the lot of commercial that we're seeing now, they don't want any development at all. They'd like the reserve to stay exactly as it is. But the general consensus was, and I couldn't tell you the exact numbers, I have to go back and look at the review, but it was enough for the consultants that put together the consultation to pull that out as a specific request from the consultation. So it wasn't, they tended to, if there was only one or two commentary on it, they would ignore it, but where there was obviously enough to warrant them calling it out specifically, a request for public amenities as a part of the upgrade.
So did I miss, did you say before that were we going to go for a public consultation again if we approve a toilet here, or are we just going to, because the recommendation to me reads that we're just going to, as part of the development now, is that correct?
So it would be a informing in notification that the toilets to be installed, as opposed to going out and asking, would you like it again, given that we've done significant consultation on the upgrade, so it would be just informing them that there's going to be a toilet. Okay,
and it's going to be up on the Mimosa end?
Yes, so I'm not sure if you can remember the original designs, but down towards where it's quite open, the kickabout space, that's there now, so it's down on that sort of bottom side there, up from the existing River Torrens path, tucked in with the shelters and other hard structures, while the rest of the reserve that is basically on Stewart and Mimosa is kept fairly clear of structures.
Okay, so sorry, it's going to be fairly clear on the Mimosa side.
Yes.
It's away from Mimosa, away from
Yeah.
Oh, so it's going to be up towards.
It's going to be
Where
basically
the other infrastructure
in the middle,
is, it's going to be
basically.
more of a
Remember
a
that.
huddle of
through worship.
infrastructure.
If you imagine there's the sort of trees that run through the middle, there's the dead one, and then that we've trimmed back, and then there's sort of 3 or 4 large ones in the middle. It's just at the bottom of those trees, so kind of smack bang in the
middle.
centre. Yeah,
Okay.
down towards the river
Oh, so
Times.
it's away. Okay.
Yeah.
And sorry, was Councillor Williams? Were you suggesting maybe up at the top of the path is just like near the main road? Is that what you were suggesting?
Oh,
sorry, I mean, going around the table there. Sorry.
I wasn't specifically suggesting anywhere. I think it was more suggesting that we review its location, given the
To make sure it's
possible
safe.
flooding.
Flooding.
But not only that, also the amenity, and I think Ben's just alluded to, you put the toilets near where there's other structures, they're going to be less visible or less noticeable. Yet at the same time, picturing the park up in that top corner that gets it further up, although it may be relatively close to the house that borders the park, I don't think there'll be many houses looking at it, which is why I said
That's
I
what I was
think
wondering too.
we should
Okay.
review just simply, rather than trying to work out anything now, just simply and to add to the recommendation and the location of the ex-Lucia Council decide to approve it be reviewed.
Okay.
So we'll go through the committee. Is that correct? The positioning of it. Who would review?
I would think we'd leave it in the hands of administration. Yeah.
Through your worship, it's probably, I just look for a little bit of guidance in terms of, at the moment it's kind of integrated with the design, at a location that, as I said, we've kind of, away from flood, or trying to mitigate some flood risk while still keeping the visual from the streetscape, or if you'd like it in a completely kind of isolated, tucked away, then we can kind of look at that, knowing that there's probably going to be some additional costs in terms of running water and further on from where it is now. There's already water being run over for drinking fountains, power for the barbecue, so it's kind of meant that the services are all kind of located together, so there will be additional costs to run that further out, should that be the direction.
Okay, yeah, because I was sort of thinking maybe up in that little corner near Ascot, so that I thought the connection would be smaller because you're coming straight off the main off Ascot, presumably, but the connection there, but yeah, but then that is closer to a house as well. Look, very difficult, I appreciate that, but I'm just thinking about some of that. I mean, the residents obviously love that reserve, so all right, I'll just leave it at that and I'll leave it to staff to.
Thank you. Well, is someone happy to move the motion then? Thank you, Councillor Wilkins, a seconder. Councillor Furlong, do you wish to say anything, Councillor Wilkins?
No, I think it'd be a great addition to the reserve.
Only the $121,000 left. Just a comment if that can be allocated to the 21-22 budgeted projects rather than new projects. I assume you haven't allocated where that.
No, Your Worship, our intention is to come back with a proposal for Council's consideration. Internally, we've been talking, along with the Mayor, talking about the potential of lighting for the Oval. Going towards lighting for the Oval. But we will formally put that to Council's
It's going to be quite an
consideration.
expensive exercise. Or then I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. (14.3.3), which is the PDI Act Delegations Update, June 2021. I was told today that we'll get more next. Does anyone have any questions regarding this? If not, would someone be happy to move it? Councillor Ashby? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Furlong? Do you wish to speak to the motion? Do you wish to speak to... Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Move on to 14.3.4, which is 2021 fees and charges schedules. Does anyone have any questions regarding the recommended fees for this for 2022 year. Councillor Williams, do you have a question?
Yes, I think so. Page 820, it's interesting, I wasn't sure to bring this up because it appears about 3 times throughout the agenda regarding tree removal. Members might remember at the last meeting we had a deputation from a resident regarding a tree that they had an issue with on Stewart or Moses, Stewart Avenue, I think. And as we went through the fees and charges, I was thinking to myself, in there it says the tree removal actual cost. Now I'm making a little bit of an assumption here that the actual cost there means that the actual cost is the cost of the tree, the planting of the tree, and then the calculation that we do in relation to the model that they use in Melbourne. And so it was opportune that this had come up after the last meeting. And thinking about council considering the removal of trees on council property at the moment, whether, and I know it'd be essentially, I guess, us paying ourselves, or as we explained before, that it would be assessed by someone else anyway, the removals. But the cost of the removal, if we were to actually put in the actual cost, the cost of removing those trees would be quite significant, given that spindly tree on Stewart Avenue was going to cost the resident $3,000 or $3,500. And it just got me thinking to whether the system that we use, whether the Melbourne model is the best system to use, or whether we should look at what councils in Adelaide use rather than what happens in Melbourne, or what councils around us do. Please correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm repeating myself, but I don't think we've actually ever had those comparisons. And I'm obviously also wondering what the actual cost would be when we're considering, and I'm happy to leave the tree issue until the agenda item later in the evening, but I was just interested to wonder what that cost would be, because I'm assuming that when the development of the club rooms at Walkerville occurred, that could be part of the costs incurred. So obviously if there was a high cost in doing that, there's actually even an opportunity for some saving in other areas, or using those high costs that we may be paying ourselves to do other infrastructure, given we're talking the precinct, not just the buildings.
Your Worship, I'll start off with what to me has now become an obvious issue. In terms of tree removal, Councillor, you're quite right. The actual cost is the methodology that we use, as presented to Council in the question from the gallery, the City of Melbourne methodology. So I think if we were to proceed down that path, if Council was comfortable with proceeding down that path, I think we need to do a little notation, actual cost, re-methodology, and we'll have to come up with a statement so it's clear to everybody, because it's clear to us in administration, but it would not necessarily be clear to everyone, because actual cost, you're right, $60 to remove the tree, why are you charging me $3,500? So thank you for actually having us put a public lens on rather than a bureaucratic lens on. In terms of the City of Melbourne, more and more councils, my understanding is more and more metropolitan councils are in fact applying that methodology, because they are the leaders in this field, in this space. I will defer to the group manager if he chooses to correct me. And in terms of the actual cost associated with those trees, if we were to apply the City of Melbourne methodology, then we can absolutely do that work, and then apply what does that actually mean for council if those trees, those 8 trees, were in fact removed from the Walkerville Oval. Group Manager, Assets Infrastructure, my comment statement regarding more and more metropolitan councils, could you?
Through your Worship, yes. We're finding, particularly our neighbouring councils and those with a small window for infield trees, starting to put a much higher value in using the City of Melbourne's method to to really provide a true value of those trees, because what we find is people see a tree, you're right, the cost of the actual tree itself is kind of negligible, but there's a cost to the time it takes to re-establish that tree. So as I mentioned previously, part of the methodology looks at things like the growth rate of that particular tree. So a fast-growing tree has a lower multiplier than one that is a slow-growing tree, because a tree's been there 10 years, may have a far higher value if it's been a slow-growing tree that's going to take another 20 or 30 years to reach full maturity. So it's taking into account some of those, and as I mentioned, council like Unley, for example, who are another big one in terms of that trees, they're starting to look at our methodology, and we're working with them, and through our Resilient Needs group, we're kind of looking at that more standardised approach, and they're looking at us and Unley and the likes as kind of the leading the way in that regard in terms of putting a real value on trees, trying to create their true worth.
Thanks, Ben. I think part of this is that we need to explain it better, because I don't know whether anyone went out and actually had a look at the tree, and I was running down that area over the weekend and had a look at the actual tree. And if you looked at it, at that tree, for $3,500 to take that thing out. It's like, it's a tiny tree.
Push it over and it'll just come out.
Oh yeah, strong wind. And so I think we need to be better at explaining those costs, because obviously developers in this situation, it's a house being just a house replacing a house. But in locations where they might be putting two houses in one location, I can think to myself that developers thinking, God, gee, having to pay all that time, I'm already paying all these other fees. How do they justify that? And I think that's the answer, is we need to be able to justify it and explain.
We don't actually need a policy, but maybe we need an information fact sheet.
I think the fact sheet, most definitely, Your Worship, and I think also the notation, the notation in the fees and charges schedule to say tree removal means, and then explaining it in detail, showing the formula as well. So I think that was the point that I wanted to make to Council earlier about to Councillor Williams, for looking at that with the public lens as opposed to us looking at it with the bureaucratic lens.
There may even be a URL you can put there as well. Yes. Because you're not going to be able to fit everything into it.
And it could have the explanation.
Taking it to the actual City of Melbourne's analysis document that we've relied on.
Yeah.
So just with the three worship, probably we have a sort of minimum charge for the tree, and that's based on our cost to actually re-establish it, which includes water, pruning, fertilising. So there's, I'm not sure the exact number off the top of my head, but there's a significant amount of that value of that particular tree that's actually the re-establishment over 3 years, while in that case there the tree itself is actually fairly low value. It's those re-establishment costs, which is the same whether it's a small tree or a large tree. The cost of re-establishing is where the bulk of the value is in that particular case.
Yeah, which is wages and stuff like that. The explanation. So I'm not sure if you need me to get something else into the recommendation. Thanks, Ben. Into the recommendation around that, whether it's just putting in a better explanation of tree removal actual cost on page 820 be included in the fees and charges. Does that suffice, CEO?
Council Secretary, perhaps if we make that number one, Councillor, with your indulgence, if we make that number one, and then number two can be that the fees and charges schedule be amended to provide a notation explaining the full costs of tree removal, appearing on page
820
of the agenda.
Rather than full costs, you might be better off putting actual cost, given that's the term used in the fees and charges.
Of the council agenda. Councillor, does that satisfy you?
I was just going to say, rather than using the word full, you might be better off using the word almost in inverted commas, actual cost, because that's how it's referred to in the fees and charges.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comment? If not, would you then be happy to make a motion? Thank you. Councillor Williams. May I have a seconder? Councillor Ashby. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. (14.4) Subsidiaries. 14.4.1 Era Water appointment of independent chairperson. CVs have been circulated separately. Does anyone have any questions? If not, is someone happy to move the motion?
But I'd like to know more about this gentleman.
Pardon?
I'd like to know more about this gentleman.
More about
And Andrea was at the interviews.
Yes, more so than what you saw in his cover letter.
Which is fairly brief.
It was, and most of them, with the exception of the female applicant that was shortlisted, had very brief introductory letters or CVs. He presented really well, very knowledgeable of the subject matter, and also gave examples of another board that he sat on, north of Adelaide. I can't recall exactly, but it was to do with the Gawler River system. And he'd been on that board for 18 months. It was very impressive and very conscious of governance, and I guess the emphasis that maybe in recent past the governance aspect of the role hadn't been as scrutinised as it should have been. And I guess the interview went for about 25 minutes, and that was probably the longest interview of the day.
And
he's also a ratepayer.
Good. Do you think he will be proactive?
I think mildly so, in terms of, I use the word mildly because he is a mildly tempered person. He comes across very mild, however insistent.
And when I say
persistent?
Proactive... persistent, that's a better one. Thank you.
When I say proactive, do you think he's the sort of person who will look for extra markets and extra money? Or will he just run the meeting?
It's a really interesting question because this did come up in our debrief after the interview with Mr. Tate. My question was around the marketing and the growing of the client base, mainly because I'd overheard this in the chamber as a point of contention and discussion among yourselves. And I was advised that the emphasis of this role was not necessarily on that, but rather proper governance and proper running of the board and ensuring that it's steered correctly.
I'm a bit disappointed to hear that, but I don't think at this stage we have any choice other than to recommend that he's appointed.
Rightly or wrongly, through your chair, I believe I was advised that the position that Wally, now the general manager now fills, is a position that should be tasked with the growth and the marketing of.
We need as much help as we can get, and we need a very broad base. So, fingers crossed.
Councillor Fallon.
Thank you. Just two questions. Was he briefed, or were the candidates briefed on the state of play with Era Water to get an insight on?
In my presence, and that was the first time I was exposed to that discussion in that forum, it was a very brief overview of where we've been, what we've achieved or not achieved, and what we hope to do before the end of the next financial year.
And so they're aware of the challenges
yes,
ahead?
Very
so
aware.
They're not going in with rose-coloured glasses there?
It was, there were two applicants that really appeared to have scrutinised the financials of the subsidiary, and he was one of them, and he was very much about the finances and about how did we get here and how do we get out of this situation.
Did he come across as sort of an agent of change management, someone that was...
Yes, but not an aggressive agent.
Yeah.
Definitely a persistent one, a respectful and persistent one.
A professional one.
Yeah, thank you.
Your Worship, whilst clearly I was not on the interview panel, and I didn't see, I must have seen his application because I shortlisted him. He was one of 4 that I shortlisted for Andrew then to assume the interview. And I can't recall, to be honest, what his letter said. But Mr Tate was a former CEO of local government, so he was the former Noarlunga Council CEO, and then he became the Walkerville CEO, where the water, this program that they created at the south, he basically oversaw a lot of that. He also was on the, he was a commissioner at the Productivity Commission, where the most recent analysis was done by the Productivity Commission in terms of the efficiency and effectiveness of local government. He's done an awful lot of work interstate, amalgamating councils and de-amalgamating councils. In terms of your question about ability to change and adapt and ask tricky, difficult questions to drive an agenda, I'm pretty confident that Mr Tate would be able to deliver on that. I had a very brief conversation with him prior to his application, as I did with another of the applicants, who also just happens to be a resident, and provided them with a lot of information about the state of play in relation to air or water. This is a 12-month, reckon?
2 years.
It's a 2 years, sorry, yes it is, 2 years, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, would someone like to? Thank you, Councillor Bishop. Seconded, Councillor Fennell. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to identification of items for individual consideration. I'll read through them. 16.3, CEO Performance Review Committee Minutes. 16.3.2, the Walkerville Development Committee Minutes. 16.3.3, the Women of Walkerville Committee Minutes. 16.3.4, the Grant Funding Update. 16.3.5, the work... Sorry, what was that one? 16.3.4, Councillor Wilkins?
16.3.5.
5, thank you. It's Councillor Wilkins. 16.3.6, 2020-2021 CapEx Program Status Update. 16.3.7, Decisions of Council Assessment Panel. 16.3.8, the Monthly Financial Report. Subsidiaries, sorry.
Everyone looks at
No, I was just looking at Councillor Furlong. You didn't put your hand up,
I'm
Councillor.
mixing it up this month. Oh, no, actually, I do have a quick... No.
16.4, you disappoint me. 16.4.1, East West Board Minutes, the 2 meetings. 16.4.2, ERA Water Board Minutes. And 16.5, Outstanding Council Resolutions. Would someone move that all of the reports be received and noted? Thank you. Seconder, so Councillor Wilkins, Councillor Coleman, all those in favour? Thank you. Carried. We only need to bring out one, which is 16.3.5, the Works Report for May 2021. Councillor Wilkins.
It's quite a trivial question, but and I know that we share services with Campbelltown. I was just quite queried about the hard rubbish collection at Lodgement and Steel, Campbelltown, in our works report. I can't say I've noticed any next to other continued.
Yeah. To be honest, that one was close. I suspect that his material was for, but they probably went and picked something up. They might have to cut something, so I think it would be more things to do with rubbish collection as opposed to collecting the hard rubbish from.
Okay,
from
that makes a bit more sense then. Yeah.
So, and they could have done that on the timesheet as a part of travel. They went to there on their way of doing hard rubbish, so that's just a oversight in terms of the timesheet.
Given the word still, I think still's got a lot to do with it. One would assume they're picking up something that's...
There'll be some sort of...
dead cat on the oval.
No, still, S-T-I-H-L, it's chainsaw or hedger or digger or something that's still...
That is a dead cat on the oval.
Would you like to move the adoption of that report? Thank you. Councillor Wilkins. May I have a seconder? Councillor Ashby. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. We now move on to correspondence. Unless anyone has any questions regarding the correspondence, would someone move that it be accepted. Councillor Joshi, seconder. Councillor Coleman, all those in favour? Thank you, carried. Moving to urgent other business. Members, does any member have any urgent other business? No. We now move into confidence. Walkerville Oval Redevelopment Verbal Update 19.1. Would someone please move that we move into confidence? Thank you, Councillor Wilkins. Second to Councillor Nenke. All those in favour? Thank you, carried.
It's fine.
I saw a table for the
What was that?
tea.
It's a little tea.
It's it.
We always used to call my father.
Right,
the
yes.
old,
Thank you everyone. Well, we've moved out of confidence and we're now resuming
even when he was
14.1.
young.
Excuse me. 14.1.3. We're returning to that agenda item, which is the Walkerville Oval Urban Tree Management Report. Do we have any further discussion on the matter? Councillor Williams.
Only to the recommendation that I would like to add the part that I mentioned before about if any large portions, which would be 0.4, if any large portions of
Be recognised.
trees are removed, that they have plaques attached and to identify their original location.
Would you rather that being part of point 2? Sorry, man.
Sorry, I didn't have to think of that.
Just keep it all together.
How about
Yeah.
point 2?
Yeah, sure.
With acknowledgement
Yeah.
on the larger pieces of wood. Tree.
With acknowledgement of
True.
the original location on the, by way of plaque on the significant pieces, I guess. And,
Yeah, significant pieces, yeah.
yeah. And the other part that I'd mentioned when we were in this problem before was whether we want in part 1 to put the council support or whether council consider.
No, you've got to say, because that's what we're asking, are you going to support it or not?
Yeah,
Not consider it, are you going to support it?
That's right, but I think
Otherwise
that
our
would be,
hands are tied, we can't make a decision.
but as I said, I think that's where it's going to be dependent upon council or being happy with the design solution.
Well, that's the,
requiring.
they won't, if they don't agree with it, they can't support it. See what I mean? We've got to be guided, we've got to have some guidance for this committee, the Walkerville Oval Committee, to agree to a final plan, to then knowing where you're coming from, and it's got to be support so that we can then put it to you. Otherwise, we're going to say, well, we don't know whether you're going to like it or not because you haven't actually said you'll support the decision.
Fair enough.
Councillor
So,
Nicky.
depending on the decision of that, it still does go identified in the planning application,
Yes.
all supporting
Yes.
documentation, and it's still being
Yes.
the decision of, what do I call it, SCAP still? Or,
Yes.
Yeah. So it's pretty relevant, really. It comes down to a community consultation at the end.
And through your worship, design changes from the original concepts have to come back to council. So you still have yet to make the decision. What this is really saying is that you're giving authority to the architects to come up with a design solution should they need one if the trees are in the way.
Yeah, this, Your Worship, this was one of the original things that we discussed within the planning committee, and we couldn't really go ahead unless we had some certainty as to what we can or cannot do with the trees. And unless we have a resolution to this effect, we might just as well not start, because we've got to get a design in place and then have to go back and argue over the trees.
And then we might have to go back to the drawing board again, and we've got to get going to meet the requirements of government.
I concur with Councillor Furlan in much of what he's had to say about trees and how
I think the whole council does.
It's a bit left and right-handed the way we're doing it, but we've got a major project on our hands which we feel that it's very important to go ahead with and get on as quick as possible. And you know, trees do grow again, and you can plant trees elsewhere, and it takes a while.
Which we do.
And we've got a pretty sound argument in terms of our tree planting policy, so I think that we need to support this and so we can move ahead.
Would you like to move the motion?
I'll move that.
Thank you. May I have a seconder? Councillor Wilkins, thank you. anyone else like to speak against the motion?
No, the only thing was, and I can't quite read that up there, was the part about the,
Does that help?
Thank you.
yeah, that's all right, the point
happy?
two, yeah, yeah.
Thank you. If you do wish to speak again to the motion as the mover? No?
No.
Councillor Wilkins, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just I'm completely in favour of A, B and C being removed. I've always disliked those trees in the 22 years that I was involved with the sports club. And they're not native, right? So they shouldn't have any issue with that.
They're a pest.
I really would see us try and keep 1 to 5, but understanding a design solution may prevent that from occurring.
And their well-being too. I don't know if one can move them. The smaller of the ones, whether it is possible to move them.
You could have
Look at that.
You can't move natives
Can't you?
because their root system is 9 times.
So
I think it's
extensive.
9 times. I might be lying, it might be 5, but whatever it is, it's impressive.
Thank you. All right, well, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. And now the meeting is now closed at 9:24, and I thank everyone for their attendance.